Hello, everyone. We are going to look into the book of Daniel, chapter 1. First, let me give you a little bit of history on the book of Daniel. It covers 70 years of history. The Babylonian Empire is dominant in the beginning of Daniel. By the end of Daniel, Persia will be the dominant kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar is king of Babylon, the apocalypse of the Old Testament. Daniel is referred to in that way, the apocalypse of the Old Testament. So when the book of Daniel starts, Daniel is about 15 years old, and by the time the book of Daniel ends, he's approximately 85 to 90 years old. So that's just a little history on Daniel. So Daniel chapter 1 and beginning with verse 1, we'll read the first seven verses. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, these little g, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God, little g. And the king spake unto Aspenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. So in verse 4 right there, um, they were going to indoctrinate their ways into these Jewish people that they brought out of their land, out the children of Israel out of their land, and they were going to indoctrinate them with their culture and with their ways. Let me keep reading. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were of the children of Judah Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name Belshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. So they are changing their identity by giving them names that aren't their names. They had good, strong, godly names. And let me just stop there and give you this uh, what their names mean. Daniel means God is my judge. That's in the Jewish name. And Hananiah, the Lord is gracious. Mishael, who is like God. And Azariah, the Lord helps. So they wanted to change Daniel's name to Belteshazzar, Hananiah to Shadrach, Mishael to Meshach, Azariah to Abednego. They gave them names that they give them names that were of the Babylonian uh, gods, little g, that were in their culture. So they changed their strong godly names to these names. But notice that in the book of Daniel, when Daniel writes, a lot of times he writes, I, comma, Daniel. I, Daniel. Notice that a lot when you're reading in the book of Daniel, how he writes that. He is about a 15-year-old young man, along with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These are all, they're about the same age, coming into, they're being exiled into Babylon. So, let me get back to the Bible here. Um, So they're gonna the prince of the eunuchs gave them these names. Okay, verse 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank thereof. He requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. So God gave Daniel favor with this chief prince of the eunuchs. Daniel purposed in his heart that he had a personal resolution, and he purposed himself in his heart. He refused to allow the culture around him and the environment around him. Actually, all four of them did. They refused to allow everything around them uh, to change them. They were Jewish. Their God was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's who they served, the living God. Okay? So they were brought into Babylon to serve the king. And although they were taken there and taken from their family, from their country, from everything that they grew up learning, they were in Babylon, but they didn't let Babylon get in them. They did not let Babylon get in them. That is very important. You know, like us today, don't let society and the culture of today get into us. We can be living in the world, but we're not part of the world. God said, come out from among them and be ye separate. Thus saith the Lord. So they did not allow the culture of Babylon with all of its beauty, because it was it's described in the Bible as a beautiful place. And the food was evidently, you know, very pleasing to the eye. And Daniel purposed in his heart he was not going to eat of the king's meat nor of the wine. So he made this special request to this chief priest, you know. Well, let me just continue to read. All right. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. He had favor. Daniel was faithful, therefore he had favor with God. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse, likening than the children which are of your sort? then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So Daniel says, well, let us eat vegetables and drink water only for 10 days. 10 days only. And at the end of the 10 days, see how we look compared to these other guys our same age. So the prince, chief of these eunuchs, he agreed to it, although he could get killed because of it. But he agreed to the 10 days that they would only eat their vegetables and their water. So okay, so he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. He consented to it. Okay, now that's God moving on their behalf. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse, which is vegetables. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and all dreams. Now, at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. So when they went and they stood before the king, their countenance and everything about them was better than anyone else that came before the king. So God, he blessed Daniel and the other 3 that were with Daniel, because they, were not going to defile their bodies with the king's meat. This stuff was offered to idols. So also notice in verse 5 that they went into this training program. It was to prepare them for service in the king's court, and by the time they came out of training, they were 10 times better. That's what I just read. Reference verse 4. Verse 4, and then look at verse 20, because by then they had come out of their training and they were 10 times stronger and more intelligent, 10 times better in all wisdom, understanding, in everything. So God blessed Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the names that they are given, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were Babylonian names. So they tried to take them out of their country and turn them into Um, you know, teaching them their culture, their ways, everything that they do, everything that they worship, the little gods, I mean, what they call gods, the little g, you know, but God blessed them and God used them. They were faithful, and when God gives you favor, He also gives you influence over people. So Daniel definitely had influence. God brought Daniel into favor with the chief prince. He also gave him favor with the king, because when you get into chapter 2, you know, that's where you get into the story of the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had that really bothered him. But anyways, so they also had insight, the knowledge, the skill, um, and Daniel was the one that had all understanding in visions and in dreams. It was Daniel. So when you get into chapter 2, um, that's where that story begins. But if you just look at these 3 points in Daniel, they had physical isolation, mental indoctrination, and identity alteration. I mean, the mental indoctrination sounds a lot like what's happening today. That just really struck me. And then their identity alter alternation. Anyways, wanting to change their names, because your name, you had a Jewish name, it meant something with God. It meant something. Their names were strong, godly names, and it meant something. It meant something great. And like I said earlier, when Daniel does he writes the book of Daniel. He writes, I, Daniel. He never forgot where he came from. He never forgot. Neither did the others. Just like us today, if we are taken out of our, say, our comfort zones, so to speak, how would we respond? Which God does take us out of our comfort zones. He will do that. He will teach you. He'll teach you some things. He'll take you out of your comfort zone and teach you. Not everyone, I don't think, I don't know. It depends on the individual, how they respond, you know, and how much they want God in their life. Not everybody loves God. There are a few people that really love, love God, that are in love with Christ. Few people that are truly in love with Christ. Jesus is the bridegroom and the church is his bride. And I was taught that long, long time ago. You know, I just thought everybody thought like I did, but they don't. Everybody don't think like me. And other people that thinks, you know, they don't think the way I do, and I don't think the way they do. But I used to think everybody thought the way I did, but no, they don't. That's when I was really young. Anyway, so it's important that, oh, let me say this. So, you know, if they were just around 15 years old, um, think of how much they learned growing up. I mean, they had to have some real Jewish family to be brought up and to be taught what they were taught, and be exiled from Israel and go into this city of Babylon. And the way that they enticed people into the city of Babylon, it was a seductive way by its culture, its beauty, its food, and all those things. And we today need to take heed and learn something from Daniel right here. And uh, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now they are known in the Bible. They are called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they are thrown into that fiery furnace. That's what the king called them. That's what he called them. But anyways, we can learn something from Daniel. A lot of Daniel's interpretations, a lot of his visions, a lot of his prophecies go right in line with the book of Revelation. They say, well, I've heard preachers say, open the book of Daniel, open the book of Revelation, and right off the top of my head, I don't know what chapters, but I know certain chapters deal with um, certain times in Daniel's life. But yeah, there's a lot of prophecy in Daniel that pertains to Revelation, but there also is in Isaiah, Ezekiel. So I'm going to stop right there for now. And if you got any comments, just make them. And I may come back here soon and do chapter 2, where we get into Nebuchadnezzar and the dream. Let me just give you a little backdrop about that, if you don't know the story. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and it troubles him. He calls for all the magicians, soothsayers, and astrologers that are in his king's court to tell him what he dreamed and to interpret the dream. And they were like, this thing has never been done. We can't tell you what you dreamed and interpret it. They said, "O king, live forever. Tell us what you dreamed and then we'll interpret it." He said, "No, you tell me what I dreamed, or I'm going to have you cut into pieces." And the king did that. He had them all cut into pieces, literally. And then he sent to have all these wise men, he sent to have them all destroyed. When it got to Daniel, Daniel went before the king and said, "Will you give me time to figure out this to figure out this dream?" He didn't say figure out, but anyways, the king gave him more time. And that was favor with God, because the king was slaying everybody that couldn't give him an answer. He gave Daniel time. Daniel went back and had a prayer meeting with the other three. I've gotten so used to calling them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I want to call them by their Jewish names. So we went back to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and they prayed. The four prayed. Asked God, would he show them the secret of this dream? And God showed Daniel in a night vision. He showed him what the dream was that the king had. And then they praised God for giving them the answer, because they were going to be slain too. So then Daniel goes before the king and tells him his dream, and not only his dream, but the interpretation of the dream. And that's a whole nother Bible story. So that's just a little bit of a backdrop of chapter 2. Anyways, you got any questions, comments? Don't be shy. God bless. Thank you.